Hi, everyone, and welcome. We are excited to have you join us for today's webinar, From Chaos to Clarity, Simplifying Audit Cycles. This session is brought to you by A-LIGN, SemperSec, and Agiloft. I'm Alex Welsh, Senior Manager of Service Delivery Operations here at A-LIGN. I've been with the firm for 9 years, focusing on ISO, SOC, and HIPAA audits. My passion is helping clients simplify their audit experience, especially when it comes to combining multiple frameworks. So this topic today is right up my alley, and I'm excited to get talking. But before we dive in, let me hand it over to our other speakers to introduce themselves.
My name's Noe Ramos. I work for Agiloft. I am the Vice President of Operations, IT, Cybersecurity and Compliance, and Business Process Excellence.
All right. And I'm Rob Carson. I'm the CEO of SemperSec, one of the founders. And what SemperSec works on is essentially making the stuff I wished I would have outsourced when I was on the other side, when I was on Noe's side. You know, making life easier for our customers to get through it and kind of be that middleman between, you know, Noe and Alex.
Awesome, thank you. And that is us there. Here's a quick look at what we'll be covering today. We'll start by introducing each of our organizations and how we collaborate to make audits smoother. Then we'll explore the benefits of consolidating audits and how to implement multiple frameworks effectively, how the right compliance team can streamline your audit process, and we'll share real-world insights from working together on audit consolidation efforts. A-LIGN is a tech-enabled security and compliance partner. Our goal is to help organizations navigate the complexities of cybersecurity and compliance with solutions tailored to their specific needs, whether it's SOC 2, ISO 27001, HITRUST, or FedRAMP. We're here to make the process as smooth and collaborative as possible. A-LIGN works with SemperSec and Agiloft in two different forms. SemperSec is a readiness partner that comes to clients at the beginning to prepare for our audits. And Agiloft is one of our clients who goes through our audits with us. SemperSec and A-LIGN have been partners for over 6 years for all major frameworks from SOC, ISO to CMMC. And it's great working with a partner such as SemperSec because we're familiar with how each other communicate. It doesn't change how the process works or the criteria to which the audit happens, but it does make the process smoother because we already know how each other operate. And then Agiloft has been working with A-LIGN on their compliance efforts since 2019 and collaborates with SemperSec on the readiness front to ensure that they're prepared for the external audits. We'll hear from all parties today on how they approach consolidating audit efforts and the benefits. Now I'll pass it over to Noe to share a bit about her firm.
Thank you, Alex. Agiloft is a SaaS provider. We focus on contract lifecycle management. So what that means is the end-to-end of a contracting process from pre-signature through the post-signature process. Obviously, we are very focused on security and compliance as we protect very sensitive data from over 1,000 companies worldwide. And I'm really excited to be here to talk about it.
All right. And I'm Rob Carson. So SemperSec, kind of what I said, is we are built to make life easier for Noe and her team, to take that burden off and also define is, right? So we're going to talk about this further, but how do you consolidate stuff? Knowing which nuance, which framework matters. Hey, this part cares more about this than that, so this needs to be stronger here. How to get through those things. But, you know, one of the things about SemperSec is all of our consultants have been on the other side. So we've all call ourselves lessons learned enthusiasts. We have messed that up before, so we're here to help tell you what not to do, if nothing else. And the other part too is, like, as Alex said, is like we love working with A-LIGN because, like, you know, as you go through audits, things like that, having that relationship and knowing that both sides are acting in good faith makes, when there is a discrepancy or something like that, you can have that conversation. Back to you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you guys. And then each year, Align conducts a compliance benchmark assessment that will be linked here in the chat shortly. And one trend is clear from this assessment: audits are definitely getting more complex. Larger organizations are more than twice as likely to undergo 6 or more audits annually. That is a lot to manage. We're definitely seeing that on the Align side. We are building out schedules that are very heavily built on top of each other with different frameworks. And that's a lot to manage, especially when you're juggling not just the overlapping requirements across frameworks, but you're also trying to keep business operations running smoothly. Noe, is this something you're seeing in your day to day? What kind of challenges does your team face when you have to have all these different requirements happening at the same time and then an audit going at the same time?
Yeah, it's a great question. When I first took over this department, before we engaged A-LIGN and SemperSec, we had a very, immature certifications structure because it wasn't as heavy a requirement as we see today, right? So over the last few years, I think just the world has changed. The requirements of our customers and prospects have changed, especially for enterprise customers. And as our company grew exponentially the last several years, we saw more and more requests and requirements coming from these large global customers who have to serve their customers and prove that they are operating at the strictest standards and that their vendors or third parties are also doing the same. So it was a really difficult problem to think about initially because I have a very small team and I was building, and there's always the OpEx versus CapEx discussion and the pressure to not hire. And yet, in order to take on certifications, which can be daunting, I think, for some who maybe haven't gone through the process, I think that it's definitely something that when SemperSec suggested layering our audits together, at first, it seemed like a big thing. Right. I questioned my own sanity for making that decision, but I'm really glad I did. And we go through concurrent audits today for all of our certifications. I think it makes things simpler when you're not collecting evidence for multiple auditors and you're not going through the same thing over and over and over again. And so the ability to do that with Align and make that process really smooth and to prepare for it with SemperSec led us to build the security program we have today, which is well certified and really successful.
Yeah, that is something I see. Clients will come to us and they will be doing audits every quarter, and they'll be so frustrated because they're constantly under audit, but they're afraid to make that jump to doing it all at once because that almost seems scarier for some reason.
It's easier.
It's way easier. And as soon as I get on the phone with them, I'm like, we need to align these. It might be hard in that first year, it's going to be difficult to kind of get on that schedule. But then once you do, you'll realize how much more resources you have and availability throughout the year to do your job, to free up your time to add another framework, maybe to start adding more requirements over the year. So yeah, it is daunting at first for sure, but it does get easier.
It definitely does. And I think that when you're supported by a company like SemperSec too, to help organize all of that together and talk you through it so that you're not questioning your judgment. It is scary to think about doing all at once because you think, I'm barely doing it this way. How would I do it that way? But in actuality, that cycle is exhausting and it's constant. If you have multiple certifications or you're hoping to achieve multiple certifications, all you're thinking about is, I'm going to be going through an audit every quarter or every month, and between internal, and the final audit, and how am I going to manage that? So I think it really came out of a necessity for our team. I went into it thinking, if it lasts a year and that's it. And next year we split them out, then we split them back out. It's not a permanent decision. But I'm really glad we did. And I could never separate them because now we're in a really streamlined process. We add a framework every year. And it's become kind of second nature. And once we get through that, 3 months of intense, work and gathering in our timeline, we get to focus on continuous improvement, which is what I care about.
Yeah. Rob, how do you get clients to change their mindset or maybe change the way they're structuring their systems or their organizations to kind of get onto that consolidated framework approach?
That's a great question. So some of it is just explaining the expertise we have of like, hey, I can tell you that if we do an ISO risk assessment, we're going to be fine for SOC 2. But if you have a SOC 2 risk assessment, chances are we're not going to qualify for ISO. It won't be good enough, unless you just came from that background. Like, it's very rare that I ever see that, right? So it's some of it's explaining the nuances and explaining, like, a lot of it feels like a Mexican food menu. How do you want your rice, beans, and tortilla? But at the end of the day, there is nuances, and you have to know those differences, right? And I think it's part of that. Part of it's also explaining cost, right? So if I have my senior consultant, because we sit there as their battle buddy or partner as we're going through that certification, right? And so if my resource only has to be tied up for 2 weeks to get through the ISO, the SOC 2, like we're going to do 2 ISOs and a SOC 2, no big deal. But if I have to tie up that senior resource for an entire week, for 3 or 4 weeks throughout the year, plus an upload party, all of that extra effort, it's like, hey, I can be more efficient. You can save costs. We can all win that way. I think that's probably one of the biggest pieces. I mean, I think because when I remember talking to Noe the first time, I was like, look, like I'm only like the first year, a lot of times I recommend like, hey, let's knock out ISO and then let's start our monitoring period, go straight to SOC 2. That way we're tight and we roll into it in the following year, we're going to wrap it all together, but I explained like, hey, I'm only going to charge you just because I got to sit through one extra audit. That's it. Mm-hmm. Like we're putting in the program correctly. We should be able to meet everything on the front end, but you have to know that. And I think, sometimes you need someone who's like, just do this. I see consultants sometimes you can do 30 things. Like that doesn't help anyone. Just do this. You're going to be fine. You don't like that? Okay, let's try this. Work through that. Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. I think that Rob's approach at SemperSec struck me as different and that he was trying to consolidate to save time instead of selling me more audit support quarter over quarter, right? If you think about it, it would behoove that consultant to keep them separate, keep the work intense, and keep the engagement high and those costs high. And though Rob's in business, he also understands what makes sense. I remember a conversation where he said, I'd really rather not lose you to another consultant who will tell you to pull all these together. And A-LIGN does it great. A-LIGN has a great process for doing this. And we've done this with them a million times. And I think it gave me a lot of confidence that we were really making the best decision for our business and our resources and our costs, as well as getting, a really incredible set of certifications from a very reputable auditing firm.
I think our record might be 4 or 5 with A-LIGN at the same time.
Yes.
That's
we just completed 4 today.
4. Yeah. I mean, you think about it,
no majors and no minors.
4.
And we're adding another next year. So we're adding the AI cert next year, the 42,000.
That's a lot,
48,001.
Yeah. The fact that you can knock it all out at once and not be in your audit fest, year round. As I always said, like, I want you to have time to work on stuff, make it better. Let's figure out what to automate. How are you tech? Let's figure out some tech enablement. Let's do some things that make sense.
Yeah.
I also tell people, pick a time of the year that's good for you to have an audit. Because if you're auditing every quarter or every month, there's never going to be a good time. But maybe July or June is a slow time for you, that's a good time to have an audit. So then you can schedule it based on how business flows or how customers work. So it also really helps from that perspective as well.
I think a nuance to the scheduling too for me was I could move all my audits progressively further back each year to align with our fiscal year, which it ends September 30th. And we had different requirements from different customers coming in at the enterprise level of, we really need this to occur at this time of the calendar year, whether it was the end of our fiscal or the end of the calendar. And it allowed me the flexibility to push them back further again the next year with a bridge letter, of course, and continue forward. And the simplicity of that actually helped me a great deal.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a huge business win for sure.
And I think that's probably something people need to realize on this call. A-LIGN's going to reach out to you, and Alex, your team does a great job. They're going to reach out to you for this annual, for your surveillance audits. They're going to probably try to time it with their annual thing, but you can move that around. The requirement is you have 2 surveillance audits. The requirement isn't they have to be 365 days from the last one. So knowing that you can flex that, 3 months here, 3 months there, especially if you're trying to align your other audits, it's okay. I think people don't even realize that that's even an option sometimes.
Yeah.
Which is where SemperSec comes in to explain it, because there was a lot of things that I didn't know were an option. And I think that's probably pretty intimidating. I think I picked up on frameworks very quickly, and it certainly isn't my first time in security or going through certifications in my career. But when you're building a more complex, scaled security compliance framework and you're really just focused, our main focus is always operating as securely as possible and ensuring that our customers have full faith in what we're doing. That's the ultimate for selling, for revenue, for everything, is do prospects and customers trust you? And do they trust what you're doing with their valuable information? And that comes from your best practices. That comes from following NIST principles. That comes from certifications proving that you are abiding by those things year round. Rob's team was able to let us know where flexibility is as far as scheduling in this example. And that really just comes from all of their experience, which was really critical. You either go to market and you find someone that has a lot of experience and you gamble if that experience is accurate, if how involved they were, all of those things, or you opt to hire a team that will battle buddy with you the whole time. And for us, that relationship with SemperSec, which was the same time we engaged with A-LIGN, has continued year after year because the value is extraordinary.
Yeah, that's a great point, because there are things A-LIGN is not allowed to do for our customers as a certification body. I'm not allowed to help to, even if I want to, and even if I have all the answers and I know how you should do it, I'm not allowed to because of our independence requirements. And that's where a SemperSec comes in. And because of their knowledge, they're allowed to tell you, okay, you are allowed to move up your surveillance audit. You can implement your ISMS this way. You are allowed to do this with your risk assessment. So they have all those tools to help you do that.
Absolutely. I think that the guidance, keeping that separation, your teacher can't prepare you for the exam that they wrote, right?
Yeah.
It's not really ethical. So I think having that preparation is really key. We would not have been successful without having SemperSec to guide us through that process. It would have been extraordinarily painful and difficult. Just due to our lack of knowledge, not because we weren't operating that way, but because it is complex and they take such a huge burden off of, helping us create our templates, helping us interpret controls, helping us, this is the best way to gather evidence. This is the best time to gather evidence. This is what you need to think about. Just having that fairy godmother, sorry, Rob, but fairy godmother there.
Fairy godmother.
To help really does ensure success. I know I engaged many different types of consultants and many different types of vendors for my job. I have broad areas in our organization. You never know what you're getting. There's always some hesitation. And thankfully, we found the two perfect partners to be really successful with our audits each year and to continue to improve our security posture.
You guys are so kind.
Yeah, we're just building you up here.
Like, no, but the thing is, like, and to be on the other side though, is having, being a great customer, you get 10 times more. Like being awesome, being great on communication, letting us know your needs, telling us like, hey, this is what's up, being transparent, because like we can't help if we don't know what the issue is. And
it's
like
a partnership.
It's a partnership. So when something's going wrong, like let's fix it. Let's get after it. Like I'm having issues here. Okay, let's solve this here. Let's do that. Like it's the same thing with, working with A-LIGN. Like, you have humans. Humans make mistakes. Humans happen, right? So when there is a challenge, hey, I can call Alex. She immediately like knows that it's once a year. So
Yeah.
she knows that like this isn't, let's say I got 60 customers. If I only call once a year, she's going to answer the phone because she knows that like I'm, hey, there's something going on. We have a discussion, and that's, whether we're right or wrong, but we have that open discussion, figure out the best way to solve it and move on.
Right.
I think that's part of the piece too of knowing, and then part of SemperSec, we designed it like our internal auditors typically, they come from A-LIGN, to be honest with you. 2 of them have, because, either my consultants have done the actual work, I've been on Noe's side of things, or if they're internal auditors, they were external auditors. So they already know what A-LIGN is looking for too. Because like we want that internal audit to be the hardest thing, because I want your external audit to be your 5th grade book report on Thomas Jefferson, where you're just showing Alex cool things and everybody's happy.
Yeah. Yeah, your external audit is definitely your time to show off, all the things you learned that year.
Yeah.
I'm going to move us into this next slide on how the consolidation works. And this is just a point on, how ISO maps over to SOC and HIPAA. But, audit consolidation is basically just finding the overlaps between the different frameworks, just like ISO covers SOC and HIPAA. There are lots of benefits to audit consolidation, like we've been talking about, saving the time, reducing the redundancies, and cutting down on costs for businesses. Definitely in A-LIGN, we proactively identify these overlaps and plan the audits accordingly. We ask clients way in advance, what is your compliance journey? You're adding a 5th audit now, that's something now we would start planning for a year from now. How can we fit that in over the next year to make sure that stage 1 happens at the right time ahead of that stage 2, along with your other audits. Because we want that schedule to make sure it captures all those frameworks in one go. Rob, how does SemperSec also approach building this schedule as well as the policies behind that? So how are you getting one policy to encompass all these frameworks? It sounds like do ISO first, maybe.
I do love ISO. I'm an ISO fanboy. I'm not going to lie. Like, it's my favorite framework. Luckily, this is a compliance podcast, so like everyone here can nerd out with me. I am a fanboy of ISO because ISO cares more about you knowing you're not perfect than it cares about you following an okay process. It just wants you to admit that you might suck at something. It's okay. Like, you've acknowledged it, you're fixing it. That's what ISO cares about, which is much more based on reality than trying to pretend that like I have a full head of hair. I don't. It is what it is. Like, I'm where I'm at, right? But I think, so there's a couple things we do. One, master audit and activity schedule. You got to map that out early. And, one of the things that, Noe brought up, which is a key point, if you're listening to this and you're doing multi-framework, figure out your budget cycle. Your risk assessment, in particular, needs to be done before your budget cycle. You don't want to do your risk assessment, figure out your risk treatment plan 3 months after your budget was due. That is not helpful to anyone. Great, we need to do all this stuff and we have no money for it. Like, that's not helpful, right? So figuring out that piece is a core piece, right? Of like, what is the cycle of the company? Okay, your budgets are due in Q4. We need risk assessment in Q3. So these things line up, and we we know what we need to spend and why, and it's all tied together to the business. It's not just because the hackers are coming, right? So there's that part, and the other part too is just knowing the nuances. Like because kind of said earlier, is like, hey, we're going to make sure we do the risk assessment according to ISO. We're going to add a little bit of fraud to make sure that covers the SOC 2 piece. Boom, now risk assessment's covered. Hey, SOC 2 cares a little bit more about evals, employee evals, things like that. We're going to add to the human security policy a little bit more on the evals, things like that, to make sure that that's covered. Like, but you have to, because my problem with like this slide right here, and this is, I can go off on this is why I love this, and sure everyone listening, Alex and I, we were talking about this earlier. I don't agree with this, because like if you're doing ISO right, I'm at 90% of SOC 2. Like there's a little bit of busy work and some nonsense that like, okay, we got to do because this is SOC 2 was created by auditors, so they care about something else, right? No problem. We handle that nuance. But like 90%'s about there. Now, the challenge too is when you see these tools out here that have their own combined frameworks, and I'm not going to name any specific GRC platforms, but I don't trust any of them, to be honest with you, because there's humans involved, and I have my opinions on how to meet things. So being careful with that. What's great about ISO, though, is there is a direct mapping because it's an international standard. So when you do NIST, NIST says at a minimum, these map 100%. We're good. You know, now I think I can probably add another 25%. Let's say it says 50%. I know I can add 25% if I just do it right. But you have to know what to do. You know, and that's where, you know, Noah kind of talked about, like, sometimes it's like, hey, I know ISO says you need to have secure authentication. I know NIST is going to require MFA. You need MFA. Plus, I know your contracts with your customers are going to require that in your security addendums. So let's just do this the right way, you know. But hey, do we need man traps? No, you have an office in a, you know, maybe we don't need to put in gate guards.
It's interesting too, because I think it's a really great point on the value of having that preparation help. We have a GRC platform. It will compare frameworks, and it tells us our percentage complete towards a framework. It was one of the cute bells and whistles I was really excited about when we bought it. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's helpful. Mm-hmm. But I would say it's actually a credit to SemperSec, their internal structure, because they came ready with, okay, one's going to tell you this, one's going to tell you this, so here's what we're going to do. One's going to tell you this needs to be in your AUP, one's going to tell you this needs to be in your AUP, acceptable use policy. So we're going to elevate and cover both. And you're doing it from the gate because that was your vision. You're doing it correctly from the gate. So you're not going back and doing massive revisions to your policies. You're not doing massive revisions to prepare for another audit. We wanted to be as strict as possible to follow the highest compliance anyway. So we were very open to, sure, tell me what the bar is up here, and let's just set that, and all of the compliance frameworks will fall into place. I don't know how other preparation companies handle that. I don't know if they're thoroughly prepping you for, you know, each compliance framework one by one, or if they're kind of the masters of layering. But I really feel like so much time was saved, even just from our policies, not process and all the other amazing things that we also save time with, but even just from our policies. And like, we all have AI now, but AI doesn't write to auditing standards following controls yet. And so it is very manual and intensive. Having the templates and guidance of, this is what you need to be doing. If you're doing it, let's put it in the policy. And if you're not doing it this way, let's elevate and put it in the policy. I think that value, even if you stripped out all the rest, is really, really important when you're in my position and you can't hire an army to do certifications.
Yeah, that's hours and hours, days, months of work in it of itself. It pains me when a client comes to us and they they don't want to think of that long-term goal. And they're like, just this year, we're going to do SOC, but in 5 years, we know we're going to need ISO, or 2 years, whatever it may be. And I'm like, well, we should think of ISO now, because otherwise it's going to be so painful in 2 years from now to rewire SOC. We can do SOC this year and that's fine. If you don't need ISO, we don't need to waste money. But, we should be thinking about ISO now if we're going to need it one day. It's always should be, what do you need? And let's try to work it in now, instead of, oh man, remaking those policies are very difficult.
It is no joke. And now it's like ingrained in our operations.
Yeah.
We're adding ISO 42001 next year, the AI certification. And right now in internal AI advancements, we're laying the framework, the groundwork already with SemperSec, because I don't want to go back and rewrite what we've established, or reconfigure process, or retrain employees, et cetera. I mean, the cost to an organization that doesn't efficiently prepare for compliance frameworks is extraordinarily high.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And Rob, you made a really good point as well. Sometimes I'll also hear from clients, this is a lot of paperwork and I don't really see the benefit of, I'm just completing things, right? I don't know what the real benefit is. Mentioning that budget is so important. Doing your risk assessment to bring value to, why am I asking for certain things to that budget meeting, to your boss, for whatever you're requesting from a security standpoint, even just from why do I need to hire more people standpoint, anything. That is such a key document. That is why you're doing it. That's one of the reasons, of at least.
Well, I think doing the risk assessment correctly, right? Like a lot of people use it as a checkbox, or it's so squishy. And I hate squishy. Like, I was a Marine, I don't do squishy well. Like, it's not my thing. Like, where am I at? What do I actually need to fix? And getting those risk owners to actually care, but for them to tell you what they care about. I think we do a lot of disservice to the cybersecurity space, all of that, because we make assumptions, and like, you need the business to tell you what they care about and why. One of the things I would tell you, a little trick, if you really want to know how the business cares, ask them how they're bonused. Each line of business, ask them how they're bonused. Because if you know how they're bonused, you know how to talk to them about something they care about. Because it ain't about the money, it's all about the money.
Yeah.
The other part too is like, one of the things that SemperSec does, because we're fixed price, we don't I'm incentivized to be efficient, right? So when we're working with NOE, we're trying to build this program as efficient as possible for both sides. Like, I don't win by making it harder. It's like, hey, it's fixed price. Now, sometimes we got to spend 40 hours talking about thumb drives. We're going to spend 40 hours talking about thumb drives. No problem. But also, if some things take 3 hours, awesome. That's how it's built in. That's how we put that package together to make sure that, like, there's allowances for things. Because sometimes, you need to have an extra 10 conversations. Okay. Hopefully you don't, but sometimes you do. And that's okay. Yeah, sorry, I just get excited because
no, it's an important note though, because to your pricing structure, I think one of the things that gave me early confidence after reference checking in SemperSec was that they were fixed price. So many of the other quotes that I had gotten were hours based, and a few were, I think, a little lower. Right, Rob?
We had one that we had to explain the difference.
And he explained the difference, of, hey, they're accounting for this many hours, and that's great. And here's kind of on average what we spend on customers, and that's great. And so I think that the fixed price, there was no unavailability, there was no not showing up, there was no lack of engagement, there was no any of those things that I was obviously really cautious about as we were building our business relationship. So it does behoove a prep consultant to be as efficient as possible in preparing you. So if you have your vision, whether you're getting there, like you mentioned earlier, Alex, whether you're pursuing ISO right away or not, but you need to in a couple of years, you're going to save so much money and so many hours by preparing with that in mind. You can always prepare for that in mind. And then working with A-LIGN on what's that cost going to look like and how can we make that better? And, you know, what does the time of year look like? Just the forward thinking. And I just wanted to add really quickly to the point that y'all were making around the business case. It's security and compliance directly impacts revenue. It is one of the, especially in our space, but in any space, you know, yes, we deal with contract data, which holds a company's most sensitive information, secret information, any information, but it still matters to our customers trusting us and trusting us with protecting their data and trusting how we operate. And do we operate as efficiently as possible? Things happen. We read about those in the paper every day, but being aligned to these sets of controls and knowing that you're playing less whack-a-mole than you normally would, I think is really important. So I just wanted to add that when you're building a business case, all you have to do is go to the CRO or the VP of sales and say, what are the enterprise customers asking for as far as security is concerned? Because as we elevated as a company, we've been a high growth company the last 5 years, especially. And you get larger and larger global clients, right? In different regions with different expectations. Now you're talking to CISOs all the time about what they expect. And if you can't say, we have table stakes, I consider ISO 27001 table stakes in our world. We have table stakes, and here's our roadmap for what we're going to be adding. I think that instills confidence. In addition to those reports showing no findings, I think directly tying it to revenue is really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then it's also, I think we've continuously touched on this as we've talked about both A-LIGN and SemperSec, but just choosing the right partner. I mean, I think it's really make or break, you know, and I'm sure Rob, you see this as well. We definitely see this on the A-LIGN side. People coming to us because they did choose the wrong partner and they ultimately kind of need to rework their program because they didn't go a route that they thought would be successful. But there's a lot of things to consider when you are choosing the right partner. It's not just for technical expertise, but also for soft skills. According to our most recent compliance benchmark report, 70% of compliance professionals say audit quality is extremely important, but quality can mean different things. The depth of the report, the professionalism of the audit team, and how audit findings are communicated. There are a few things to consider when selecting a partner: experience or breadth of services, the use of technology, will the team challenge you in a constructive way, and how do they handle differing opinions or findings? Rob, we've kind of touched on that. You know, we just get on a call if there's a difference of opinion, you know, and chat it out. You know, it's never controversial to have a difference of opinions. But Noe, how did your team go about, you know, going through that list? I know you talked about price was something you considered, but what were some other qualities that were important to you?
Well, I think when I first started doing research, I did not realize that there were auditing firms, just like any other line of business, that didn't have the best reputations for being thorough or didn't have the best reputations for an audit's an audit for a reason. And it's kind of a word that makes us all cringe because we think of like taxes and financial audits are a company. And it's kind of supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be by the book. It's in this case by the controls. It's supposed to be that way. So for me personally, it was very important to me to find an auditor with great reputation. I didn't want to cut corners. That's just not what we do at our organization. I wanted to know how we could mature our organization. I knew the only way we were going to do that was hopefully through OFIs, opportunities for improvement. But I knew the only way we were going to do that was finding a really reputable partner. And so I did a lot of reference checks and listening to customers. And that was for both SemperSec and A-LIGN, but really listening for, how was it? Were you happy? Have you heard, feedback? I mean, our audit reports are requested, hundreds of times a year, and they matter. We have been asked before, who audits you? By prospects in the sales cycle. It's come in RFP questions. It's come in, a variety of ways. I think that matters. I loved this checklist because I feel like these are great questions to ask prospective auditors as you're going through the selection process. But I think beyond that, what you guys had already touched on, but was really important to me, were two things in addition to these. Once we did the check boxes of references and case studies, and do you do this and do you do that, you can kind of narrow it down to maybe just one or a couple. I think from there, for me, it was really about, what's the escalation process like you guys talked about. We've escalated a couple of times, I think, during an audit where we interpreted the control one way, the auditor interpreted it and explained it in a slightly different way, and not in a confrontational kind of way. And we were like, no, we really think it reads like this. And here's why. And Rob's team just called, and immediate response, same day even response. And it was discussed and either explained, hey, this is why. And we do believe the control needs to be audited in this way. And I remember one time after our explanation, being told, you know what, you guys are right. Like, we've gone and we've looked, we've done some more research, and we can't accept, this evidence. Not cutting corners, just having a conversation, because there's human interpretation to absolutely everything. Even though the controls are quite clear, especially with ISO, which I appreciate because it's less room for, debate. Having a clear escalation path was really important to me because it's something I heard, and calling reference customers of different providers this was a pain point. And then the second, for my organization, both in selecting SemperSec and A-LIGN, was, we need to learn. We needed to learn. And even though, as you mentioned, Alex, ethically, we couldn't prep with A-LIGN, not really fair. What I really appreciate from every auditor we've had at A-LIGN is the willingness to educate my team as we go along, the willingness to explain a decision or explain a control, or this is why we check this way. Not like, holding training classes, but really being willing to educate and not just come in and fine, submit your evidence and I'll write out what I have to say and we're done. And I've greatly appreciated that, because it has taught my team how to do this and do this really well. They've also learned from Rob's organization, but we still use them because we still need their expertise. We may use them in a lighter way in preparing for some certs, and then we engage heavier again because we're adding a cert, right? So we have this ongoing relationship year after year. But I think that Rob's team's always really fair too in pricing the engagement to what we're doing that year. What are we tackling that year together? Usually when you're engaged with a vendor, they just care about increasing it every year. We all have a job to do, right? We all have businesses to grow. And so I think that the escalation path and the willingness to educate are also critically important. On both sides, both from a company like SemperSec and from A-LIGN.
And so those on the webinar know, at A-LIGN, we do have a formal complaints process. So if it does escalate past the point of we're not agreeing, we cannot come to a conclusion here on, the client is not agreeing with what A-LIGN is saying and A-LIGN's not budging on their opinion because we believe that's what the standard says. It then does go through a formal complaint process. So we definitely have that built into our processes. But yeah, we do enjoy conversing with our clients. So that's something, I was an auditor, I really enjoyed doing. Yeah, it's not teaching necessarily, but it is like walking
Just a
through.
little educating. Yeah,
Yeah,
just a little bit.
why am I looking at this? Or why did I point to this in the internal audit? Or why am
Yep.
I asking for this? It is, we enjoy that part of the audit process and working with our customers as opposed to against them all the time. Like you said, the word audit is not very fun and no one wants the title of an auditor, really. It's not the sexiest title.
You have all the
But
friends at the lunch table. Come on.
Come
yeah.
on, security and compliance and
You
audit.
know you were the popular kid at the lunch table.
Really?
Yeah.
We're at our
Right.
own lunch table.
Yeah, but we call ourselves consultants, so.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to add to these are great, like kind of large bucket questions, areas to consider. The depth of experience from the auditors at A-LIGN was remarkable. We worked with some very senior people, and even people that weren't as senior, meaning they hadn't been doing it for 25 plus years, like Judy. Were still incredibly educated and prepared. And I found that to be really reassuring. Again, because I wasn't here to cut corners. I wanted to know you can't show continuous improvement if you don't know where you could continuously improve and how to do that. And what's enough, what's enough for a year, I think that's also important. The guidance that we got from SemperSec on this is a great continuous improvement effort. This right here, this is good. Tackle this one. Don't try to, tackle everything at once. The guidance through that was incredibly helpful from both.
Yeah. I would add, when we partnered with A-LIGN, I looked for a company that did multi-framework because when I'm working with Noe, I need a future proofer and go, hey, these guys do all the things, whether we go ISO to FedRAMP, and that's, by the way, listen, that's not called FunRAMP, it's FedRAMP. It's awful. Like, I need to have a firm that can do it all. Now, am I always going to be able to do a consolidated audit? Not if we're probably doing FedRAMP. That's a whole other adventure. But at the end of the day, like, I can still have one major audit party. I can knock out PCI. I can knock out this. I can knock out a ton of different frameworks in one audit fest. Might have multiple auditors, no big deal. But the other part too is like back to that escalation path. Like, who we partner with from an audit firm is making sure like I have a relationship so that when something has to have a discussion, it's fine. And to be fair, like Alex is probably gonna forget more than I'll ever know. So, you want to have someone on the other side who you feel is a peer that knows that standard as well. I mean, I've been doing this since it was the 2005 standard. So like, this isn't my first rodeo. Like, we know the standard inside and out. So like, you want to be able to have that discussion with somebody who you feel like knows it just as well as you do, if not more, so that way you can have that real heart to heart of like, does this make sense? Or why are you interpreting it this way? This is different. But yeah, because like I said, you have humans, right? And it always comes down to the individual auditor. But, as Noe attested, like, there's a reason why it's very rare that I actually get to talk to Alex. So anyhow.
You also brought up another good point, Rob. Not all audits are going to work together. Like FedRAMP, even 42001 Noe, it doesn't exactly work with 27001. It's not going to exactly pair with SOC. But we can make the schedule so that it at least is working together. Yes. So while we're having a consolidated audit, it's not going to all be perfect and aligned together, but at least we're all working our efforts towards the same goal. And maybe you just have 1 month that's kind of, intense as opposed to all the time.
We're covering the IT security hygiene that needs to be covered for 42001 is covered in the 27001 so that you're having one upload party.
Right.
If nothing else. And that's why, like, SemperSec does, we typically time our internal audits within 3 months of A-LIGN's audit so that, like, we can reuse a good bit of the evidence. Some of the stuff, no, you gotta take new screenshots, no big deal. But, like, a lot of it, like, the policy is still the same policy. Like, here you
Falls
go.
within
Where's
the,
your
yeah,
stuff
falls
that you
within the
need?
window. Yeah.
You know,
No, that's
up.
true. I think the coordination part, Alex,
Yeah.
from both ends, Rob just explaining how they try to save us time without cutting corners, but they're considering all the pieces. We're putting that schedule together as we're gathering evidence for our internal audit, which, to Rob's point, they want to be the hardest so that we're fully prepared when we have our final audit with A-LIGN. So I think, sorry, A-LIGN. I think that we really, I go back and forth all the time, y'all. It's so hard for me. I really think that the coordination and the amount of time that it saves. I saw a question of like, is this an add-on feature that adds cost or reduces cost? Hiring a prep company like Rob's is obviously not free. It adds cost, but it saves cost and reduces cost based on hiring, hiring even one body. So the savings is there. You are spending a little bit of money, but the savings is there. And that's why we chose, that direction for efficiency. But I think I was surprised by the continued efficiency and partnering with both of y'all to look at the overall, well, here's where we can combine, or here's where we have two auditors on the bridge at the same time, because they're going to hear the same evidence. And that makes sense. And then we're going to have separate ones for this reason. I think that efficiency is always the top of my mind because I don't have the luxury of writing big checks and just burning resources. And I've worked at other organizations where I've gone through certification processes. I explained they were more mature organizations and they were much larger companies. Our company's about 500 people. And I think that I had the experience of an army of people to help. Here, when I first started the security group and officially started making it a security compliance group, there was two. And so we were in the trenches, it became a necessity to hire a company like SemperSec, but the alignment that we've had all together and really great. I'm very confident, comfortable with my decision. I think that what we've grown in our framework and our compliance, like I said, we certified just today was our closing audit meeting on ISO 27001, ISO 27701, SOC 1 and SOC 2 at the same time with no minors and no majors. And while perfection is never the goal, because we want to get better. I think that we have a history. We had 0 findings last year. We have a history of knocking it out of the park. And I think that it was because of this collaboration, which is why I was excited to be on a webinar about it, because I could talk about these two all day. But it benefited Agiloft. Like that's my job, is to get us there, consider cost, make the right decisions, decide what we need, when the right time is, and listen to what our prospects are asking for to continue to grow our business.
Yeah, on that, I find in the long term, customers that have a partner in the long term are saving money.
Absolutely.
It might be an upfront cost, but they are saving money in the long term by implementing whatever framework they need to implement the right way.
I totally agree. And like we cost compared when we engaged SemperSec, and once I had the hours kind of explained to me from a fixed price partner who was like, we're willing to gamble. If you need us double time, you need us double time. No one's going to talk to you about hours. And they never did. No one ever came and said, hey, you're engaging us a little too much. It was always, they were there for every single meeting, every single ISMS meeting, every meeting with an auditor, every project meeting we had internally. And I, saw that to be true. But I think that it wasn't this astronomical, expense. If I looked at hiring a resource, I was going to spend more. And I think that this just became a natural fit for that.
I can attest to that because I have to hire these employees. They're definitely cheaper. You know,
They're not cheap. They're not cheap,
these
especially
students are not
seasoned
cheap.
ones with real experience, seasoned
Yeah,
ones.
they actually know what they're talking about. Like you get what you pay for.
Yes.
You do.
Yeah.
You do get what you pay for,
That's
especially
the
in
part.
this area.
I tell people all the time, like, we're not the cheapest, we're not the most expensive, but you get what you pay for. Like, if you want an event, you know, it could be whatever it is. But, you know, the thing is, like, and to be fair, like, you're right, Noe, like, we've done maybe 4 change orders in 6 years, and they've been because a company bought another company. Like, you bought another company, we got to do another internal audit. Like, something material, not.
It was from our side, like request.
Yeah, like you guys
Not
bought
a
another
need. It
company
was
that
material growth.
you wanted to add in scope. Okay, we got to figure that out. But otherwise, like, you know, it's like we don't do that because, like, I don't. It is what it is. We're gambling, but I don't want to be penalized for being efficient. And like, everyone wins if everyone's efficient, and because we sit there as your battle blade in the certification, like, that's the confidence you have is like, I'm not here to look stupid with a line. Like, I work with them a lot. Like, we're here to win. Like, I want them to go, yep, another SemperSec one. This should be fine.
Yeah. Right.
Not, oh boy, this is no. So, cool.
Well, I think we have one more question in the chat. What advice would you give to organizations considering audit? Rob,
I'll
knowing
take that
that
one
yeah,
first.
go.
I would say to consider the need. What is it going to do? Is it impacting your revenue? Is it eliminating events, security events from happening? Is it maturing your compliance framework? Is it all the above? And having your goals clearly in mind. Doing an assessment of where you are and your readiness, because you can't really plan to tackle something you don't fully understand the impact of. And then using some of the questions that were shared, and I believe there was a link shared in the chat to those questions, carefully evaluating who audits you and carefully evaluating whether you choose to hire employees to do it, making sure you get people that truly have the experience, or carefully evaluating a vendor like SemperSec, looking for people that want to guide you and not just sell to you, I think is the biggest piece, because, well, they have a job to do, right? I'm tired of being sold to, like, every day, all day, personally and professionally. I just want to know how we're going to get there. I'm very straight to the point. Just tell me how we're going to get there and what's it going to cost me. That's what I want to know. And I think that knowing where you're headed and why is probably the most valuable thing. You don't want to go grab a cert for the heck of it. You want to have a good reason and make sure it's the right one for your industry, the right one for the region, for instilling confidence in prospects, because ultimately that's always what it's about.
Rob, anything else you want to add there?
I think you guys said it all. Like,
did a great job.
Like, we're at the end of the day, like, I would tell you, if you're looking for consultants, whether you go with SemperSec or not, just make sure that, like, what are they hustling? When you look at MSPs, a lot of them, they say they do this. They've got one guy that maybe knows one standard. It's hard to be an expert at multiple frameworks. Like, even at SemperSec, we have multiple multidisciplinary experts at different pieces, because, like, I have a full-time NIST guy, because, like, NIST is NIST. And, like, while we all know NIST and we work with it, I have a guy who, that's his base, right? And the other part too, I'd say, if you're doing consolidated audits, if you primarily sell B2B, ISO is a great base. If you primarily sell to the government, NIST is your base. Just figure out, but that's where you use us to go, this is what you should do. Try this. Like, this makes sense, you know. So yeah, but make sure a lot of people say they know things. Like, do your research.
Do the research, check those references.
Like, the reason why we have a full-time internal audit is I don't even trust my own people. I want to make sure we're going to do it right. I got to make sure my consultants do the right thing. Because like I gotta check my own work. Like, and I don't want Alex to say that my internal audit didn't count. So I gotta make sure I have separation of duties, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know. Sorry, I get excited.
Well, thank you all for joining, and thank you, Noe and Rob, for having this with us.
Awesome.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you.